Good evening, sir. Tonight I'll be doing discussion number 1 in the story Jove, Callisto, and Arcas. As you can tell, we have Jove, the god of thunder and god of heaven in general. We have Juno, his wife, over here on your left. In the middle, you have nymph Callisto, who's like a follower of goddess Diana, who's the goddess of the hunt. And so those are the main characters in the story. And before we get started, I just wanted to say that I feel these stories are just kind of skeletons in the closet, really just malfunctioning, just really weird, crazy stories of families and just how they're dysfunctional. And I thought my family was dysfunctional. Well, not in comparison when you are reading about Jove and Juno's crazy relationship with Jove's escapades with women, and that's not different with this story. This story has the same kind of plot line where he ends up raping someone, a girl. Typically when you have a girl on this plot line, she gets raped. So in this story, we start out with Jove coming down to Earth and inspecting the damage done by Phaethon, who caused a lot of destruction by trying to rain the sun god's chariot, and he ends up dying by Jove's thunderbolt, as you know. And so Jove inspects the damage. He regenerates the earth, the lovely land of Arcadia. He brings back to life greenery, water, everything. And while he does this, he comes across a lovely, beautiful nymph named Callisto. And Callisto is a huntress. She is a follower of the goddess Diana, who's the goddess of hunt. And she was just minding her own business, sleeping, lounging around, and Jove manages to approach her by disguising himself as goddess Diana. That was the only way he could ever get to the nymph. And this is not surprising. Disguises or transformations from god to humans or gods to other gods is a very common trope in many of the stories you have read. And so he does this, and that's how he ends up raping her. After doing so, Callisto is very, very embarrassed, very shameful of losing her virginity. This is kind of another trope of purity, pure. We come across it with water later on in this book. It kind of references the whole idea of purity. And so she goes back to the nymphs and Diana. At first, she couldn't approach Diana because she thought it was Jove again. So it's kind of like a typical victim of rape, shy, loss of confidence. So Diana doesn't think much of it, but later on they all take a bath, and that's when Diana notices the baby bump and tells her to go away, threatens her, don't ever dip your feet in my waters, and this is the whole reference of holy water, purity. So Callisto runs away. She's so embarrassed, upset, and she's pregnant. And so later on she has her son Arcas. Remember the title, Jove, Callisto, Arcas. Arcas is her son, who also is the grandson of Lycaon, which is kind of a foreshadowing of the events later on, when it comes to Lycaon being transformed into a wolf in Lycaon's feast. So after she has her son, Juno gets really upset because now, hey, there's evidence of this adultery of her husband. And I think this is unbelievable how she doesn't talk to her husband, she doesn't approach her husband and talk about the issue. She assumes the worst out of Callisto. She calls her a homewrecker. How could you do this? You're such, like she was the mistress. But in my opinion, it takes two to tango. Husband's at fault as well. Your husband is a homewrecker. He's the homewrecker, and he's a disgusting animal. But she doesn't see it in that sense, which I think is maybe an indication of society, and maybe women were inferior, so they couldn't approach males, or their husbands at least. So she grabs Callisto's hair, transforms her into a bear, and then Callisto, she's in the woods one day. She's a bear. She can't. She's scared of herself, and she actually sees her son, who's 15 at the time. And this is later, after obviously she was transformed. And she runs after her son. Her son's scared. Her son has no idea that his mom is a bear, and that his dad is Jove, also. And so in his defense, he takes a spear and jabs it into the breast of the bear, and in the process killing his mother, or at least his mother would have died if Jove didn't step in and turn them into constellations. And this really pissed off Jove, or Juno, who like sees this kind of like an insult to injury. Like now she's constantly reminded of this like adultery of her husband, and she's really, really upset. And so she finally calls the end of this by like talking to the ocean gods and telling them never let these constellations into their waters. The sin of all sins, kind of, that's like how she kind of rids herself of this whole mess. But she was really, really upset. And you don't hear much about Jove in the end, except for the fact that he turns her into constellations, which I think is kind of ironic, because I feel like it's glorifying their relationship. Maybe he secretly liked Callisto the whole time, but the story made it kind of sound like it was, it was worse, I guess. Maybe because it was publicized to the whole world, this whole adultery relationship. So that's the ending of my story. Thank you for listening, sir. Hope you have a nice evening. And again, here's my funny picture. I like to draw. So here's Callisto again. Oop, Callisto turns into a bear. Here's Juno, homewrecker, and then Jove. So I hope you enjoyed this discussion, sir. Have a nice evening, and see you in class.